Good morning, good morning. The cat is not bothered by the weather. Liquid sunshine. Maybe we'll have some pretty weather today. Quick reminder, planning to kick off the live stream at 4 p.m. And today I hope to do a little bit of work in the shed, get some of the models worked on, but it's largely going to be study. Of course, Tuesday, start with the doctor's appointments to get my medical back, because nothing ever went wrong for a pilot in a doctor's office. And study and more study. You know, the more we build, the better we get, obviously, like most things. And the same thing goes with training. The more you study, the better, the smoother the training goes. So I used to say in the military, you sweat in training so you don't bleed in battle. And it's sad. I've gone to some check rides. You can see people that didn't prep, and it's a hard thing to watch. So, you know, until not that long ago, I'd be in my last year of flying because you had to retire at 60. Not that long ago, they pushed it back to 65, and I guess it was about maybe 10 years ago, something like that. But I was like, oh, yay, I get to retire at 60 and build model airplanes every day. And then it was like, no, we're going to go to 65. I'm like, oh, man, I got to keep working. I'm going to keep flying jets around the Caribbean. Of course, I also fly the East Coast. But so I was wondering, getting to model airplanes, to models. And I was trying to think, what was the first 1/32 scale kit I ever built? Because when I was a kid, basically the 1/48 scale kits were what I built because they were only $1, and the 1/32 scale kits were around $3. And my brother built 1/32. My older brother built 1/32 scale, and I was like, you know, I can't build those. Those are grown-up kits. You know, you got to be a big boy to buy one of those. And I remember being excited when I was able to buy my first 1/32 scale kit, and I'm fairly certain it was one of the Revell series, but I cannot remember what it was. And that was a pretty important milestone for me. You know, I was kind of like, how come I can't remember this? Because I remember being all excited about it. It could have been the Wildcat, but I don't. You would just think I would remember that. Now, I have the 1/32 scale Gulf Hawk. It's the one that you pull the prop out and rotate it, and the gear retracts and extends. And even today, I was proud of myself to get that to work. And but still, it's surprising that I can't remember what the kit was, because to me that was that's when I was a big boy. Now I'm building 1/32 scale. Revell kits back then, you know, they all had this Jack Linwood box arts on them. Until I later learned what Tamiya was, I thought, you know, okay, here's how it works. Aurora for the interesting stuff, like, you know, the television license stuff and everything. And then there was Monogram for all the 1/48 scale fighters, because that's what I bought. There was Hawk for the smaller scale, like airplanes no one else made, like the Convair and things like that, prop liner, which of course they sold as the Air Force transport. And then you bought, of course you did Monogram for armor also. And we weren't really into cars, probably count all the cars we did on one hand, but you know, obviously if you wanted a car, it was Monogram or AMT or MPC. But then if you're gonna grow up and get the big boy stuff, you got the 1/32 scale fighter plane series, and that was Revell. And of course, once Tamiya entered, well, that was different. Tamiya was very expensive even back then, comparatively, because it had to be shipped over from Japan. And if you were buying a Tamiya, well, you had to be a professional model builder. You know, only someone like our friend Doyle did Tamiya. And then my brother got some Tamiya kits, and I was like, you know, well, yeah, but he's a teenager. He has a job. Um, that's, I remember he had the white box German Jagdtiger, the hunting tiger, and it always amazed me. He had this fantastic artwork of the vehicle in this white box. I'm like, well, okay, you know, you can see the product and everything. And then when he actually built the well, technically it's not a tank, it's a tank destroyer, I guess, or well, the hunting tiger was made to shoot long range, so I guess it would classify as a tank destroyer. Today we'd probably call it a support weapon, but anyway, he did the typically nice job he always did on them, especially on something so expensive. But what amazed me was, as I picked it up, and you know, this massive tank, but there was no interior in it, and I pick it up, the whole thing's so light. I'm kind of like, wow, you know, it's big and it's expensive, but there's, you know, it's like a movie prop. It's just hollow. There was nothing in there. I remember that left a little bit of an impression on me. Apparently more than the first 1/32 scale kit I ever bought, since I can't clearly remember what that was. And wow, this is like forgetting who you took to prom. And I took, oh, what's her name? That was the way it worked. 1/72 scale was for kids, 1/48 scale was for serious older kids, and 1/30, okay, 1/72 and 1/72 were for little kids. 1/48 scale was for more serious kids, and 1/32 scale, that was for the older kids, you know, grown-up kids. And if you got 1/32 scale, you were obligated to paint it, because, you know, you'd spent $3 on that kit. That wasn't going to sit up there in bare plastic. Of course, I remember that was easier to paint because obviously everything was easier. It was bigger. And although airplanes have fiddly parts on them, to be sure, I really didn't know what fiddly parts were till I started building motorcycles. I was like, you have got to be kidding me. And the worst part was the chrome. Oh, by the way, that reminds me. Do you guys remember the GTOs I built? The red one, the orangey one, the 67. The, or was that the 65? Good Lord, I'm slipping gears. But the wheels literally fell off. I picked it up to move it on the shelf, and the two back wheels just dropped. And so I had scraped off some of the chrome so the glue could adhere, but apparently not enough. So I plucked those things off, and I went to town grinding off all of the chrome so that they could adhere. And they're staying on now. Yeah, that's going to be my new thing whenever I build a car, is first thing, take the chrome out and just scrape all the chrome off the areas where the glue has to adhere. I thought just rubbing off some little areas would do, but no, it's all coming off. The only chrome I want on there is the part you see. And fortunately, it's not hard to get that stuff off. But, you know, I don't mean to nitpick, because now I'm going to sound like you're whiny, you know, but I really think when they manufacture those things, that might be worth a quick redesign. Just make it a snap-on part or something. I know it's not worth doing. It's not that big a deal. I'm just me. What do they say? IPS. Somebody was telling me IPMS stands for idiots pestering model shopkeepers. But so what's gonna bug me? Just as a placeholder in my head. There's a phrase you don't hear every day. As a placeholder in my head, I'm gonna tell myself my first 1/32 scale kit was the Wildcat, and it might have been. And I have another one on the shelf. I've got the one built on the shelf, and I have the other one. You know, I just might. The one I have on the shelf is they're both F4F4s, or yeah, the folding wing 6-gun model. Externally, and I've got the squadron book on the Wildcat. Externally, the only really difference that you can tell between them and the Dash 3, which is fixed wing with 4 guns, is the folding wing and the guns. And I'm wondering if I might not just go ahead and seal up the wings on one of them and plug the gun and make it a -3, and then have the other one as a -4. Because, well, as long as I'm on that, let me. You guys may already know I did a long time ago. I did the air operations of the Battle of Midway, which was an 8-part series, and unfortunately, the computer I did them on crashed. I lost the hard drive, so I lost most everything. So, but it is out on the YouTube, and it did have a couple of errors in it, which any historical thing's going to. But modeling history is different than other stuff because, you know, then getting a little technical details right becomes more important. Well, a funny thing is that I actually spent a lot of money on models. Po me. I bought just about every monogram / Revell 148 scale SBD I could get my hands on, and I bought just models. Oh, such a good time. Because I wanted to be able to represent everything in models, and then I wound up doing half of it using IL-46, the game, and just doing screen captures with fraps. And the quality's not that great, but the information is essentially mostly correct. But what I got upset by was the Battle of Midway which is really one of the most important battles of the Second World War, and it keeps getting told wrong. Now, to research that, I read 7 books, and I did. I went to every website that was dedicated to it I could find, including the official Navy website. And by the way, official military websites are not. Sadly, I hate to say this, they're not always right. So, long story short, I run around all these websites, and I get all of a sudden, and it took months. It took me 8 months to make this thing. And of course, my attempts at green screen were just laughably bad. But I found an interview with Collins and Murray, 2 of the B-26 pilots that survived the battle. And the Navy back in the 70s was a gear down, hook down. They did a series, and they interviewed Wade McCluskey and a bunch of these other guys, not long before they passed away, I might add you, because most of the senior staff, guys like Wade McCluskey, most of them died around 1976. It was just mid-70s. And when you look at how old they were, and everybody smoked in those days and ate red meat, so it's no surprise that very few of them lived past 80. Although Max Leslie did, and so did the one who was, Dick Best, Richard Best. And he's been interviewed several times. And what I always find interesting about Richard Best is he's the one that the recent movie Midway centered around, the dive bomber pilot. And nothing against Ed Skrein, the actor that played him. He's a fine actor. Did a great job as Ajax in the Deadpool movie. But I just, and I understand that Best was a real aggressive guy, but something about his portrayal just, I don't know. But by the way, Best was from New Jersey, so from my understanding, he had I've seen him talk, he had that New Jersey accent, whatever that New Jersey accent is, you know. Well, you can go watch the interviews with him online. I think he's always wearing that bow tie, and you know, the man hit 2 aircraft carriers in a single day. I'm kind of like, yeah. Don't think because a guy wears a bow tie that he ain't a bad ass. But anyway, when I modeled them, I didn't want to put any markings on them other than the national markings. All the Japanese aircraft just have the round. Some of them have the carrier bands on them for the Hiryu, and which is the 1/32 scale 0 I have in there right now, which is actually an Action Toys kit. And people rag on that because you put part of it together with a screwdriver, but it's still a plastic kit, and it's a pretty decent one too. I didn't have any trouble putting it together. It went together nicely, and you can still glue it all together, you know. But I actually put an electric motor in that one so I could use some footage of it, and I used about 5 seconds of footage of it. But when I did the models, what I want to be able to use them as interchangeably as possible. But the next one I do, you'd have to build several hundred models if you want to get right down to getting like squadron markings correct, or what Kankaboo it came from, or what squadron. That's one reason I'm building at 1/32 scale Brewster Buffalo. But the next one's not going to have any of the video game footage in it. It's going to be a little more, you know, cut down the melodramatic music and the animated dogfights and everything, and just go with the facts using the models. So many people have done such a good job of covering the Battle of Midway now, it seems redundant. The reason I wanted to do this was because the battle kept getting told wrong, and I figured models were a great way to help do it. I mean, you know, come on, it was also an excuse to buy a bunch of models. God, I bought every can of that medium gray spray paint I could for the U.S. Navy aircraft. But all of the construction jobs on the airplanes are quick and dirties, because they weren't going to be close to the camera. I had to hit everything, including the canopies, with dull coat because I was getting green screen reflection. There were a lot of production technical issues. And next time I do it, I'm not going to do it that way. I think I'm just going to have the model sitting there while I do voiceover, and perhaps use some maps and stuff. But I'm not. But what I was getting at was that all the movies and the documentaries tend to gloss over so much that's really important to the battle. How many of you knew that the Battle of Midway, only 2/3 of the naval air power in the famous 5 minutes actually found the Japanese fleet? Did you know that an entire carrier's worth of airplanes flew off in the wrong direction, except for the torpedo planes, which was the vaunted Torpedo 8? So none of the dive bombers or fighter planes from Hornet saw the battle. They sent 10 Wildcats on what was called the Flight to Nowhere, all of which ran out of gas. The 2 squadrons of SBDs, some made it back to the carrier, some went in the ocean, and a bunch of them made it to Midway. And they were shot at by the Marines. Okay, the SBDs were you didn't want to land with a bomb on board if you could. So when they went to Midway, they decided to ditch their bombs. Well, there's a coral reef. Midway is a coral atoll. There's an area out on the reef that you ditch your bombs, and they started dropping their bombs out there to get rid of them. The Marines just saw these at a distance, these round engine airplanes heading at them, dropping bombs. They started shooting, and they hit 2 or 3 of them. Fortunately, the SBDs all turned so they could see their profile, and they had a pattern you were supposed to fly to, a recognition pattern, and they, oops, ceasefire, they're ours. And none of them were shot down, hallelujah. Although one of them did run, I think one of them ran out of gas and went in the bay, in the atoll. That's what the PT boat, there were 3 PT boats at Midway, and I don't think, although in the artwork you see them shooting down Zeros, I don't think they actually shot down any aircraft, but they were important for around fishing up the pilots that went in the water. And in fact, you see those PT boats in the documentary that Howard, John, who was that movie director was there? Not Howard Hawks. John Ford. John Ford was there with a movie crew, which is why there's some documentation of it. And you see those PT boats taking the dead out to bury them at sea. And I think they took the Japanese pilots that were killed that crashed on the atoll. I think they took them out there and buried them at sea also. Now, if you ever watch that documentary that by John Ford, one thing I will advise you is a lot of that footage. Now, the footage of the burning hangars, the explosions going off, that's all real. But a lot of the aerial footage is... and I edited out of my video, is staged. It's using the Curtiss Hawks, which look a lot like a Zero, but when that one makes a low pass, and you look, wait a minute, something's wrong with that Zero, and you realize, wait a minute, it's got 2 little gun barrels sticking out of the cowling. And you know, that's a P-75. That's not a Zero, and of course, he got wounded pretty early in the battle. He did keep rolling the camera. He did get like, I don't know if it was like it was in the movie, but he did catch some shrapnel. I don't know if that's where I don't think that's where he lost his eye, though, because, you know, John Ford always had that patch over the eye when he did the John Wayne movies. Anyway, there's actually a photograph of him with a bunch of the Marines taken before the battle, I think, and he was right proud to be there. I'd like to see a movie director do that today. So when I build the models for the documentary, I had to spray paint everything. I kept it very generic, no specific carrier markings except for a couple of the zeros, and the only valve I had, and I don't even know if I used it in the video or not. The only valve I had, I was trying to get a valve, and the kits are just all really expensive. And then I wanted 1/48 scale because it was easier to photograph to video. But when I got it, I found this guy. He had a valve for sale. Actually, it was his wife. I think he passed away. It was an estate sale, and she had 10 models for sale, but they were already built. And I don't care. I'm just going to plop paint on this, and one of them was a valve, so I ordered it. Well, of course, the gears had been knocked off, and it didn't have any landing gears on it. I'm like, great. You know, if it was a Kate, it wasn't a big deal. I just photographed it in flight with wheels up, but I wound up, one of them was a Sonia, so that valve I have in there actually has the wheels, the landing gears off the Sonia glued onto it. And I had to paint it green because apparently around the time of the Pearl Harbor attack, remember how I was talking how up to Coral Sea, we still had the red and white tails and the red dots. Well, the Japanese have been painting their dive bombers that, it's called Imperial Japanese green, but it looks like a gray, like a super pale green, almost looks like a gray. I think it looks like a gray, but anyway. But they were repainting some of their planes too. Now they'd always painted the Kates green, so early war Kate would be dark green on top. Later war, a lot of that had chipped off, and they started showing a lot of the metal underneath, and some of them were using camouflage pattern. But the Val dive bombers, like the Zeros, had been that light grayish green. But before Midway, not long before Midway, they decided to paint the dive bombers dark green. So most of the dive bombers were dark green by that point. Just so everybody was playing with paint schemes on their aircraft, trying to make them, you know, harder to see. And it's hard historically to get that stuff right. And, you know, that's one of the problems with history modeling. If you're going to build them well, when it was determines how you paint it, if you're trying to make it accurate. And for something like that, then I kind of do sort of nitpick the accuracy. Well, the valve I got was gray, so I went ahead and slopped green paint all over it, and I definitely made it a rough paint job, kind of on purpose. And it had the red tail because everybody likes to put the big colorful red tail with the yellow stripes or whatever, which is the flight commander. And I was like, no, I want to reuse this thing. You know, I don't want every airplane to like Kobayashi's. So I just slopped green paint on the tail and kept it, didn't put any numbers on it. That way I could just reuse it over and over and over again. But another thing that just keeps things confusing, let's say you want to do a Navy Wildcat. Now the Marines, generally speaking on Midway, they had this gigantic round star on the side of the airplane, which was a standard for the Navy. But you look at a lot of in the Navy Marines, but you look at a lot of the Navy F4s at that time, they had the small star back towards the tail and the big number down the side. And I didn't want to get that into it because I wanted to be able to reuse the Wildcat, so I just put them all. But they weren't exactly the same either. Same with the SBDs, but then you see the SBDs that have the gigantic star on the side. And I haven't seen the small star near the tail with that didn't have the red dot in it. So I think what happened was that they'd had enough possible fracture side or potential fracture side issues that they decided to just scrape that crap off the side and put the biggest freaking star on there you can, so we quit shooting at each other. And so I model them that way. And fortunately, God bless them, one thing you can get decals for is 1940s naval aircraft. So I usually just use the decals that come in the box, but I've noticed that some decals are coming with the big star on them, and there's a faint area in the middle where you put the red dot separately if you want the red dot. And I was thinking that looks a little funny because if you don't want the red dot, you have this little kind of darkish area. But then I figured, you know what? Maybe that was accurate because the red dot would have been behind it, because some of them did have the big star with the red dot and they just painted over the red dot, and that would have left that little gray area in there. I assume the crew chief didn't scrape off the old paint or prime it or anything, because you know, they were doing this pretty slapdash pretty quick. They had to, you know, shooting war. There's a war on, boy. So I see modelers argue over this thing, and all I can think is, man, if this is what we're quibbling about, we're doing pretty good. And I guess World War II aircraft are still my single favorite thing to model. And the more I see those aircraft, and the older I get, and the more I start learning about the mechanics of them, the more I really respect the people who actually flew those things. When I learned to fly, we have a thing called an E6B. It's a circular slide rule for calculating crosswinds and fuel burns and stuff like that. Well, in some of the footage, you'll see the naval aviators pull it. You see them running out the door with this gigantic board under their arm, and it's just a big E6B, and it slides into the. They have a slot in the panel where the little thing just slides in. You're flying off of a moving airfield, flying literally on a watch and a compass. And you got your big E6B with iffy weather reporting. And then you're going to try and find that moving airport in another location in a big ocean. And if it's a beautiful, clear day, a little bit easier because you might be able to see it from altitude. But any weather, low visibility, and later on they had, you know, was it Huff Duff and a few other things to help them. Not Huff Duff. Oh, they had a Zed Baker, a little receiver to help them, like an ADF to help them find the ship. But it was touchy to use, had a lot of issues, and respect. So anyway, and but I like to model everything. That's just my favorite stuff to model. Well, anyway, guys, I prattled on here for, oh my gosh, how long have I been talking? Why did you let me go this long? We'll see everybody at 4 o'clock this afternoon for the live stream. And you guys take care. And question of the day: what was your first 1/32 scale model? You guys have a good one, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.